Welcome to another episode of the Lightspeed Investing Podcast. I'm glad to have Lauren here with us today. She is the founder of the Black Diamond Process, where she helps visionary men get to their goals and dreams a whole lot faster than they would if they did it on their own. Lauren, glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Philip. I'm really excited about our conversation today. Honored.
So, a thing that when I met you, I would say that separates you apart is not only, are you someone who is a tactician, but you also kind of bring in universal and spiritual principles, right, into the realm of business and success, which there's not whole lot of people doing that, and that's why I kind of found this to be a unique conversation. Before we really go deep into, how you do what you do, what was your journey, to getting here? What inspired you personally speaking and led you down this current path?
Such a great question, and thank you so much for that warm introduction. So my path was a pretty wild and winding one, as we were just talking about before here. I started out as a conservatory trained professional musician. A lot of
Mm.
people are very surprised by that. So extremely, like, I understand, like, high performance. I ran a chamber ensemble, toured in North and South America. Of course, I was always like tapping into my creativity and intuition the whole way, but wasn't using it in the strategic way that I necessarily do right now for my clients. And I've always seen things a little bit differently, like
Uh-huh.
as a disruptor. And so I was always at the same time really exploring spirituality and more metaphysical energetics and things like that. Ancient text, almost became a yoga teacher. And then what people don't really realize all the time is that musicians train like athletes. So it was like very grueling. I was in New York City at the time, and there were, tons of travel, like the 8 hours of
Wow.
practicing and
Yeah.
refinement and all of that. And a lot of leadership and a lot of commitment there. And I had
What
done
was
that
your
for,
particular instrument, by the way?
yeah, I was a flutist. I was a flutist.
Flutist.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, very, very beautiful, interesting time. And then I did that for almost 2 decades. And
Mm.
and then I had my daughter in 2010. And that's when my world shifted into motherhood. And I know we probably have a lot of parents here that know that journey, that what happens when we step into that. That's like a whole different kind of leadership, right?
Yep.
And then at the same time, I was also diving deeper into exploring both energy and entrepreneurship. So this was like the thread that was kind of leading me down this path. I created and ran an e-commerce business. I was selling yoga jewelry, landed in Yoga Journal magazines. I did this all myself. I was a meditation teacher, and these like two things were kind of coming together at this time. And so that quickly shifted into leading soul-led entrepreneurs in business. And people are asking me, well, how are you doing this? How are you doing this so fast? Um, my capacity, how is your capacity so huge for, like, you're a young mother and you're doing this? And, there was a lot of risk taking involved. As I also know, a lot of your people
Mm.
understand like what that takes really to hold that and be that. So I was building insanely fast. And I just started to see how these unique insights were creating revolutionary results in my clients until I had a 30 plus programs and master classes. I helped hundreds of visionary entrepreneurs, but they were more towards like coaching and small business. And then then things weren't really working, didn't feel the way I really wanted them to feel. And I know a lot of kind of visionaries, and I hope people are going to take away from this story. There's two catalysts in my life, and I think that many people can relate to this experience in terms of experiencing a catalyst in our lives that makes us really question
Mm.
what are we doing here, right? What are we really doing? And so at that time, I had launched these 30 plus programs. I had a pretty decent audience of like 10K or something like that. And I was feeling like somehow wasn't really fully expressed or fully me. And the two catalysts that shook my world basically happened at the same time. And so one day I was just supporting a client in Boxer, and then something landed like, this isn't it. I never want to talk about this again.
Mhm.
And that just hit me like, oh, okay. And I think that a lot of visionaries that kind of move through, especially if you're like a generator of, and you're a creative, you're creating these things and creating these things and sort of like aiming toward this goal of success. And then you kind of get there and you're like, wait, this isn't it. This doesn't
Mhm.
feel great. It felt really empty at that time for me because I was only using like a fraction of my gifts and I was working in a kind of short-sighted way. So there was like that
Ah.
success on paper, right?
Mhm.
And the level of impact and the kind of conversations I was having, it didn't have the vitality for me. And around the same time, my daughter was diagnosed with something called PANS, which is essentially an autoimmune encephalitis, which presented itself in a really terrifying way. And all of that was kind of like this vortex turning point for me. And this is really going to make sense. I'm going to tie this back to my work, but this is really where I discovered my Black Diamond process. I had to look at my life with this kind of blade of truth, and I had to admit where I really was, and
Mhm.
could I be that, that perfect spiritual wait, being part of the 4 a.m. club and meditating for hours, and could I have these perfect thoughts, and could I really do all of this while also navigating probably the darkest times of my entire life? And yeah, the answer was no, that the modalities that were working for me before were not working. Even though my clients had incredible success, for myself, it actually wasn't working at all. And so, being a caretaker to my daughter, and all of that, all at the same time, that's when I learned about how to hyperspeed. And this is really like collapsing timelines to goals. And I just bravely walked into the unknown and I shredded everything. I killed the entire coaching business that was becoming lucrative. My husband was like, what are you doing? And I closed my groups, I closed my business, I focused on my daughter. And at the same time, this sort of building of, okay, now I'm going to launch this big thing into working with, high impact visionaries. And I had realized what I was doing before was very, very templated. And I was still trying to make it work based on someone else's template. And I know we're all, in that space of when we learn something, we are looking at someone and we're looking to the teacher, right, to show us the way, to show us the modality. But then there's this moment where we just have to trust ourselves. And so, yeah. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, no, I can relate. I mean, it sounds to me like for you, a really big one was definitely your daughter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you also had a self-awakening moment where, similar to when I was immersed in medicine, I thought being a surgeon was the right fit until
Yeah.
I got really, really immersed, and then I was like, I don't think this is it, right? So I mean, you don't learn those things until you put yourself out there. And I think what it sounds to me like is, you were learning, but then you realize you were like, I need to go out and create my own version of me from what I have learned. Is that kind of, you know,
Yeah, 1000%,
yeah.
1000%. Yeah. And even though in sort of some iterations I was doing that, it was like this next level of like, oh, I mean, just, of clarity and illumination and exactly what that looked like. Yeah. So, and I noticed that a lot of visionaries will, business owners and founders and leaders, like there's this kind of golden thread, I like to call it, that they come to me with that same issue of like really desiring a big impact, right? And feeling this ambition and reach that high level with strategic action and trying to get it right like a straight A student. And but if you're multidimensional, right? If you have all these things that you do, and your legacy is something that you feel in your bones that you want to create, and you start doing it like someone else, yeah, you start to feel stuck. You start to feel a little suffocated and kind of stuck in like, this is the way it needs to look and be, and it isn't
Mhm.
nourishing. And so yeah, scary place to be, for sure.
And so for you, going through this journey and now, crafting your own, I would say, arena, of genius, what do you have to say to, the fellow listeners and the audience here in regards to what they can take away? in terms of lessons, pearls of wisdom, and how they can apply it to their lives, right? To make it even more fulfilling and more successful.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a beautiful question. I think that, when we have that catalyst, or we just have, I think for a lot of people, it's just something's missing. Like there's an ache, there's something that I want, it doesn't feel quite right. It's number one, having the courage, the bravery to really illuminate where you might not actually be telling yourself the truth, right? Where you might actually be stifling that true desire. And then in terms of, for me, it took some big catalysts. I don't think it has to take that for everyone.
Mhm.
Um, but there are those moments that we really are there to look. And for me, it was the kind of rebellion against the self-help industry, because it wasn't, I was trying to like fit this mold, and it was very templated, and it was very like, here, just do this. And I was like, wait, this doesn't work. And I think that when you're an innovator, when you're someone who is visionary, um, learning how to, number one, see where you are kind of diluting your own genius, and then having it's a mixture of self-love, and inner power, be able to hold that tension of going to do the thing even when it's crazy. So for me, it was like, okay, now I'm going to work with visionaries. Now my fees are 5 figures. Now I'm walking in these circles. Now I'm mentoring with billionaires. Now I'm doing this from not doing that at all, not being in those circles, and then being 1000% me. And so if anyone takes anything away from this too, is when we are connected to our own blueprint, our own inner genius, it is one of the most magnetic things that
Mhm.
you can ever unleash onto the world, right? So if I was looking at my past, I was trying to be this love and light, and you see what I have here, right? Like I am,
Mhm.
this is my vibe. This is who I am. I've always been this way. But there was like, oh, I had to fit in some kind of spiritual box, or I have to fit into some kind of business box. And the moment I busted out of that and I just started showing up as me, yeah, people were like, "Whoa, who are you?" And I don't know what the heck you're doing, but I wanna be a part of it. I'm like, "That's
Mhm.
amazing." And it's so magnetic. And so I see this for people as
No,
well.
I appreciate that, and I can relate, just some things about myself, my own personal goals and dream is to become an NBA team owner one day,
Yeah.
right? And that's a huge part of it is because I'm Jayhawk raised from Kansas. But my main thing is, if I have to buy a team just to put myself on the roster, then that's how I'm going to get it done. But ideally, I like to push my own potential on the basketball court, see if I can make it as a player first and foremost. Um, and it's funny because, like there's that saying, usually it's the crazy ones that change the world
Yep.
because they're not only crazy enough to think it, but to go do it and go after
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, before this summer, I was able to earn my way to private facility, right? Access to private facilities. And then after the training, in the summer recently, like sometime in October, I was coined the MVP of the private facility,
Oh.
during this span. So like I said, obviously there's things that I think to other people may seem out of reach,
Yeah.
but only you understand the vision, right, that you do see. And it's important to go after it, if you want to live the life that makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, can definitely
Beautifully
relate to
said.
you on that. I'm glad that you were able to shed away from your previous I guess cage, right?
Yeah.
And become an even better self. So Lauren, thank you so much for the time here today, and opening up, your own journey, being a bit vulnerable, and talking about the pivot that is now allowing you to work on a much bigger capacity, right? With international billionaires as well.
Yeah.
So for those listening, for those curious to learn more about you, maybe they want to be in touch with you, especially if you're a fellow female entrepreneur who also happens to be a mom, right? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think the best way to get a hold of me is recodewithlauren.com. And yeah, there we can connect. Or if this is showing up on LinkedIn, feel free to connect and shoot me a message. Yeah. Thank you so much, Philip. This is
Of
great.
course, recodewithlauren.com. And Lauren, I appreciate your time today. I'll be looking forward to speaking with you again. Okay.
Thanks
Thanks so
again.
much.
Bye.
Yep. Take care.